Hey, sophomores. I'm here to give you the In Search of Jesus lecture that I promised you. I do have a true confession to make. Um, I forgot yesterday to do that. And you might not have noticed anything because, casual Friday, I'm wearing a sweatshirt, except for this sweatshirt is literally 26 years old. 27 years old. And as you're about to find out, I'm also wearing sweatpants, no makeup. The good news is that I don't have to wear my shield and I don't have to deal with any unruly children in the classroom because, as you can see, there are no children at all, unruly or otherwise. So it's just you and me, and you get your own personal lecture because I wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to hear about this wedding of Cana in a deeper way. And this particular insert, you will have questions on tests from this. So I wanted to make sure that you had it available to you. Before I start, a big congratulations to both Brecken and Justin. I am so proud of you both. And how well you did, how well you ran. I know that you ran for God's glory, which is what I was praying in each of my classes yesterday. So congratulations, way to take Cornerstone to new heights. And I know next year it's just going to get better. And we're going to get 3 more girls out for that girls team, and y'all are going to state. So congratulations, I'm proud of you. Let's talk about John 2, shall we? So we're going to I'm going to read, and I hope you can see. I think you can see what's up there. I'll turn off the light though, so it's glary. Mood lighting. So I probably should brush my hair. Sorry. Let's read those first 11 verses. Oh, no, we're not going to read the first 11 verses. Never mind. We've read them a number of times. So the book of John, the Gospel of John, I guess I don't need to stand there. Just kind of talk to you guys. The Gospel of John is divided by scholars. This isn't John's division, but divided by scholars into 2 parts, into 2 sections. The first section is called the Book of Signs by scholars. By the way, you should have your lecture notes and you should be able to fill in those blanks. And if you miss something, just rewind me and go back over it again. So the book of signs within the Gospel of John encompasses the first 12 chapters, chapters 1 through 12. And in the book of signs, we see events or public signs that convey Jesus' identity. Remember, I told you what I wanted to name my first study on John was, who is this guy? Because that's the question that John is asking his followers. And he wants them to come to the conclusion that this guy is the Messiah. He's Jesus, and he's the Messiah. So in the book of signs, Jesus reveals his glory. And that's the first 12 chapters. So a little bit more, 21 chapters in John, a little bit more than half of the book is the book of signs. And over again, we'll see through Jesus' acts and his deeds and his words that he is showing us who he is. And John is putting that on full display in his gospel. And Jesus' glory is revealed. Beginning at chapter 13 to the end of the book, so chapters 13 to 21, a little less than half of the book, that's called the book of glory. And that part focuses on the glorification of Christ via the cross and the empty tomb. Now, that's almost a little less than half the book. In fact, starting in verse 13, we're a week away, about a week away from Jesus' death. And then beginning in verse 14, it's the night in which he was betrayed. It's the night before his crucifixion. So that covers just a few days from then until his resurrection, chapters 14 through 21. So in the book of glory, as I told you, in the book of signs, Jesus reveals his glory. In the book of glory, in the second half of John, Jesus receives glory from God. This is what it's talking about in John 1:5 that is part of what you're memorizing now. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This is a microcosm. This verse is a microcosm, like a mini version of John's gospel. Because in the book of signs, it describes how the light shines in the darkness. All those signs, all of those words and deeds of Jesus are pointing to who he is. They're a sign pointing to who he is, and how the light shines in the darkness. So that's what the book of signs is describing, how the light shines in the darkness. The book of glory tells us how the darkness attempted but failed to overcome the light. Who is Jesus, right? Jesus shines in the darkness, but the darkness didn't, can't, and never would overcome him. So remember, John calls this the first sign of Jesus. And because John calls it the miracle at Cana the first sign of Jesus, it's believed that this portion of the Gospel of John recounts the very beginning of Christ's ministry. He's just called his disciples, some of his disciples, maybe not all of them, but he's begun to at least call disciples, and this is the beginning of his ministry, or very close to it. In other words, the story of the wedding takes place chronologically before any of the ministry recorded in the Synoptic Gospels. This is as early as it gets in the Bible of an account of Christ's ministry. So, as we've mentioned before, there's a big problem at the wedding, and here it is. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." So this, as we mentioned in class, this would have been a big deal to run out of provisions. And it could have even led to a lawsuit on the family or on the governor, the master of the feast, who was supposed to get enough provisions for everyone. At very least, it would have brought shame on the family, and that is a very dire thing in shame cultures, which most Eastern cultures are, and it would have brought shame on the couple and the family. We lived in Korea, and I remember learning this term, to lose face. And to lose face meant to bring shame on yourself. We talk about hanging your head in shame, right? And you lose face. And the worst possible thing you could do is shame your family. Now, this is where in class I show a clip, a video clip. Don't know how to do that here, so you can look it up. You can Google on YouTube Mulan dishonor. On YouTube, just dishonor scene, and it will come up. But it's where she meets Mushu for the first time, and she ends up slapping Mushu, and then Mushu gets angry and says, "Okay, dishonor on your whole family, dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow," which is her horse, of course. And it's funny, but it's true, because she begs him, she gets on her knees, and she begs him not to dishonor her family, not to dishonor her. That's the worst possible thing that could happen. And so this would have been a shameful thing for this family and for the person in charge of it. Mary may have had some official capacity, and that may have been why she was so upset. Or perhaps it was a family member, and she didn't want to see members of her family be shamed. But perhaps she just liked sticking her nose into places where it didn't belong. I understand that a little bit. But any way you read it, to me, it sounds more like, "Help! They ran out of wine. What are we going to do?" More than, "Hey, did you hear the schmoes ran out of wine?" I mean, I think she is pretty upset about this. She's almost frantic about this. So in her panic, she turns to Jesus. Would that we would all do that when we get into dire straits, right? Instead of worrying, instead of going to our friends, that we would turn first. And Mary did. She turned to her son for help. And Jesus' response is interesting. It's very formal. In our language, it would be like calling your mother ma'am. Ma'am, what do I have to do with this? Right? Now, you may have been raised in a military family where you were taught to say yes, ma'am, yes, sir. I was too, but not with my parents. My parents were, from the day I could speak to today, were mommy and daddy, not ma'am, not sir. And so it's a very formal response and a mild rebuke. And a rebuke, however mild it may have been, is not what we would expect from Jesus to his mother. Why would he rebuke his own mother? Now, Mary probably wasn't expecting a miracle. I don't know that she would have known to expect a miracle. Maybe. But she is, in some sense, presuming on her relationship with her son. She's probably a widow at this point, and I bet she found it easy to depend on him. That's easy to do with an eldest child. And if Jesus is your eldest child, I would imagine it would be even easier. One of my favorite pictures, maybe my favorite picture of my three children, was taken at Bellevue Cemetery just after my mother's burial service. And it's a picture of Josh, who was at the academy at the time, so he's in uniform, and Katie and Lane. And Josh has his arms around them both, and he has engulfed them, and their heads are on his shoulders, crying. And that picture of Josh engulfing his brother and his sister and caring for him reminds me of this story, that Mary is turning to Jesus for help, for solace, to fix what is wrong. But Jesus, on his part, is redefining their relationship because he's no longer under her authority. And he could no longer, Jesus in a sense had to put a wall between them because he could no longer take orders from her or from anyone else for that matter. His only concern was the will of God, his Father. It's not unlike what he said to his parents when he was 12 years old. Didn't you know I have to be about my Father's business? He had to be about his Father's business, not his mother's business. And I don't mean his father by Joseph. That's not who I mean. I mean God, the Father, of course. And so his only concern is the will of God, his Father. Because you see, Mary, just like everyone else on earth, had to come to Jesus as her Savior, not her little boy or her son. Can you imagine how hard this was for Mary? You probably can't because you haven't had children. But hey, you're at home watching this, so ask your parents how hard that might be. Ask your mother. I know how hard it has been to let go of my 3 adult children. And I'll tell you the truth. Every single time from 2009, when Josh went off to school, and I remember that he called me late at night, the night before he had to, he was in Colorado, the night before he had to report to the Air Force Academy. And when I said goodbye to him, I knew I wasn't going to be talking to him again until after basic cadet training was over for 3 months. And I sobbed when I hung up that phone. And to this day, till the last time one of my children left, which was in August when Lane went back to college for his junior year. You'd think I'd be used to this by now. And I went up on the sidewalk and I walked along next to the car waving, and I watched until he was out of sight. And I turned around to come back to the house and I saw him. It is difficult to let go of your children, but for Mary, it would have been even more difficult, especially in what she was releasing him to. So Jesus' answer is basically, why do you involve me? Literally, it's a Hebraic idiom. It's a saying that we have those sorts of idioms. We have those sorts of sayings as well that everybody understands. And literally, it means what to me and to you, or what do we have in common here, or how does this concern us both? Jesus here is declaring at the very beginning of his ministry that he is completely free from any kind of human advice, agenda, or manipulation. He's going to do what his Father tells him to do, not what man tells him to do. That's good advice. So he says this puzzling thing. He says, my hour has not yet come. Now, there are two words for time, at least two words for time in Greek. This would have actually, it was written in Greek. The conversation actually would have taken place in Aramaic, but it was written in Greek. But in Greek, you've got this word, hora, which literally means hour. My hour is not yet come. And you've got kairos, which means time. And they're mostly interchangeable, not completely. I mean, my hour has not yet come doesn't mean a literal hour. It means a time. So the word used here when he says my hour is not yet come is hora. Now we'll see this word again, and that's why I wrote it up here. But this word and this phrase, my hour has not yet come, we're going to see again a number of times. It's almost, it's like I don't know if you've heard this word yet in English, but it's a prolepsis. A prolepsis is a literary device where you take a theme or a word or a phrase and you plop it down, but you're not going to develop it till later. And then when you get to the later, you go, oh, I remember he said that back there. So Jesus says, my hour is not yet come, but this theme of Jesus' hour not coming is going to continue to come up in John. And so it's being said here, but it's going to be developed as the Gospel of John, as Christ's time goes on. So in John, my hour has not yet come, my hora has not yet come, not kairos. We'll get to that at some point, but when Jesus says, my hour is not yet come, and the word is hora, what he means is that his hour of glorification has not yet come. And his hour of glorification is his death on the cross. It's not time for him to be glorified. So as I said, it's a prolepsis, it's a reference to a theme that will be developed later. So Jesus here at this wedding is likely picking up on the symbolism of wine and saying the time for him to provide wine, to provide abundant wine, has not yet arrived. Has not yet arrived. In the Old Testament, the picture of Messiah, a picture of Messiah, is at a banquet. In fact, a wedding banquet, at which he supplies abundant provision, including overflowing wine, which is a picture of joy and rest and peace and perfection. That's how Messiah was pictured. A way, there's other ways. There's a suffering Messiah as well in the Old Testament. But one of the pictures of Messiah is that when Messiah comes, he will provide for his people lavishly. And Jesus is saying that day, that eternal banquet, that's not come yet. That's going to come via his glorification. By the way, it still hasn't come. It will someday in heaven. But his hour of glorification on the cross hasn't come yet. That hour of glorification will lead to the banquet at some point eventually. Now listen, Jesus is not refusing to act. And obviously, Mary did not interpret it that way because she says, do whatever he tells you to do. She was expecting him to act somehow. So Jesus may be saying that he will act even though his hour has not yet come. His time to be glorified has not yet come. But this time to begin his ministry, that has come. And so he will act. Mary, for her part, probably didn't understand all of this very much. She just wanted the problem solved. But that misunderstanding is another common theme in John. We're going to see over and over again how people misunderstood what Jesus said or did. So let's take a look here at John 12, 20 through 30. Now, so I've told you that we're going to hear over and over again Jesus saying, my hour has not yet come. My hour has not yet come. And then we get to John 12. This is the last chapter in the book of signs. So this is just before the book of glory begins. And here's what happens. Now, among those who went up to worship at the feast were some Greeks. The feast is the Passover, and this is the Passover at which Jesus will be crucified. So these came to, Greeks, by the way, are just non-Jews, Gentiles. So some Gentiles, they weren't necessarily from Greece. They were Gentiles. It was a general term for Gentiles. Greek was a general term. So some Gentiles, not Jews, want to see Jesus. And so they came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida. I don't know, in Galilee. Maybe these Greeks lived there. These Gentiles lived there. I don't know why maybe they knew Philip, and asked him, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. They wanted to meet Jesus. Philip went and told Andrew. Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus. And Jesus answered, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. So here in chapter 12, Jesus says, now the hour's here. It wasn't here in chapter 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of everything through 11, but now the hour has come. And indeed it did. Now, we've talked about the solution about Jesus saying, fill the jars with water, now take some to the host and become wine. It was the best wine ever. We won't go through that because we went through that pretty thoroughly. I want to skip down to the sign itself in verse 11. This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So it's called a sign. And I believe that John was intentional in using this word sign because he could have used any number of other words. I think I spelled that right. I might have the I and the E backwards. No, I spelled it right. Very good. I don't know. Semyon is probably how, or something like that is probably how it's pronounced. But John could have used any other word, many other words for a miracle or a mighty work. But he chose not a miracle. He chose not a mighty work. He chose the word sign. Why? Why does he call it a sign? I believe John chose the word sign because this act of changing water into wine was more than a display of supernatural power. It was that, but it was more than that. It was a new revelation of God. In other words, in this act, in this miracle, God is revealing something new. That's what revelation is, new information. And like a sign, the miracle is pointing to something. Y'all didn't go to school at the building in La Platte, but I spent a number of years trying to figure out the best way to get there because there was so much work going on. And I finally ended up just taking Base Lake Road because I wanted to avoid Highway 75 at all costs. Why? In part because it was really hard to figure out what lane were you in, how were you getting, and at one point I almost totally missed the exit because we'd been turning left. I almost totally missed the exit to Highway 34 where you turn right and make your way around to the school. And at the last minute, I saw this sign. Highway 34. And I went, whoa! And I got off on Highway 34. Minus that sign, I wouldn't have known where to go. The sign was pointing me to someplace, to Highway 34. Like that sign, this sign was pointing people to Jesus and the truth of who he is. This way is the Messiah. And so it's pointing to Jesus' identity. Who is this guy? He's Messiah. He's Jesus. So the miracle at Cana is a sign pointing to Jesus' identity as Messiah. I also love this picture of a wedding banquet because the Old Testament picture of Messiah is one who provides a wedding banquet, who provides a banquet with abundant provision, especially wine. That time, that hour, that hora has not come yet. But this miracle is a sign that it is going to come. Jesus used the picture of a wedding banquet in his parables, and so did Paul. Paul talked about the wedding banquet of the bridegroom, called Jesus the bridegroom, and the church his bride. What a perfect place to announce, to reveal the arrival of Messiah at a real live wedding banquet. But there's more. Something new is being revealed here. Remember those stone jars? Remember what they were used for? They were used for purification rites. They weren't washing their hands like we do COVID. Make sure you do it for, 30 seconds, a minute. I don't know how long, but make sure you're washing your hands. That's not what they were doing. They were dipping them in to ceremonially, as a rite, a ceremonial rite, to say, I'm clean before God. That's all it was. It was a religious action. And Jesus, in this story, is saying that the purification rituals are being replaced. No longer will purification with water be needed. No longer will those jars be needed. No longer will any ceremonial act be needed. Jesus will provide complete purification with his death on a cross and his resurrection when the hora arrives. But wait, there's more. It isn't just that there is something being replaced or one thing being replaced, but there's total replacement. Not just of purification rites, but of an entire system of how people connect to God. Jesus doesn't just provide wine. Jesus is the new wine. Look what Mark says in Mark 2. Now, John's disciples, that's John the Baptist's disciples, and the Pharisees were fasting. And people came to him and said to him, why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples, Jesus, do not fast? And Jesus said to them, can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day. Jesus is saying, I'm here. Let's celebrate. I'm going away, though. I am the bridegroom. And then there's time for fasting. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is destroyed, and so are the skins. But new wine is for fresh wineskins. He's saying, I'm doing something completely new. I'm not taking the purifications and the law. I'm not throwing the law away. I'm fulfilling it. And in doing so, I'm making something completely new. So it's not just of a replacement of the purification rites, but the entire system. And in and through Jesus, the entire system of how a sinful people connect with a holy God will be replaced, renewed, and restored. This is a quote from one of my very favorite theologians, Dr. Gary Burge. The story of Cana, therefore, is far more than a story about a wedding and some wine. It is a story that carries remarkable symbolism for Jews and their Messiah. Moreover, it is a story that makes sweeping commentary on the world into which Jesus is coming. They have no wine is not simply a comment by Mary about the panic of the wedding's host. It is a theological statement about the Judaism that is now meeting its Messiah in his very first miracle. They have no wine. And Jesus is saying they have no way to be made pure for real before God. But just as I am supplying what is needed at this banquet, I will supply that need as well, fully and completely. How beautiful is that? So in this miracle, the glory of Jesus, remember the book of signs revealed Jesus' glory. The glory of Jesus meets the purpose of John. We read in John 2:11 that this, the first of his signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. And then, as you know now, the thesis statement, the purpose of John is these were written that you may believe. What he wrote in his gospel, he wrote so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So John 2 reveals the glory of Jesus. And in John 20:30 and 31, John tells us this story so that we too might put our faith in Christ. Amen. Sorry, I forgot to set this up, but it'll be on YouTube very shortly. See you on Monday.